What's up, guys? Welcome back to Newswave. So the Mario 3D All-Stars collection is out, of course, releasing on Friday, and we had talked about last week where it seemed that they were mostly being emulated and the Wii version of Mario Galaxy was being like halfway emulated and brought over. Well, it seems that dataminers have continued to go through these three games, and they found something interesting about one of them, pointing to the emulator being used, maybe even more so outside of this collection going forward by Nintendo. Maybe they could have some cool stuff planned. We'll talk about that here today, as well as Sony responding to the PlayStation 5 situation around pre-orders that has not been great so far for most of us. As always, guys, if you enjoy these videos, make sure that like button helps out a ton. And if you're brand new here, hit that red subscribe button down below. And we're going to start today with Monster Hunter Rise, specifically the engine that it's being built on for the Switch, which is the RE engine. Let's actually go over to a statement from a Capcom PR. You can see that here. It does say the game is currently being developed with Capcom's proprietary RE engine in order to provide a new approachable Monster Hunter experience that can be enjoyed anytime, anywhere, and with anyone. Further, Capcom is also developing the role-playing game Monster Hunter Stories 2, Wings of Ruin, in order to provide an enjoyable experience for fans of Monster Hunter and RPGs alike. So this is good news because we had heard that Capcom was one of the companies that said, hey, we need an extra gigabyte of RAM in there. Can we do that? And Nintendo eventually pushed and got 4 gigabytes of RAM in the Switch. And we figured Capcom was planning something. It appears it was Monster Hunter Rise using the RE engine, which makes sense for them to do that. It's just good to finally see it come over to the Switch. Keep in mind, when you move this over to ARM, you could maybe even use that for, I don't know, you could say phones or tablets or anything there, mobile. That's something that I'm sure most of these companies and developers would like to also kind of experiment with. So really, it makes a ton of sense to get the RE engine set up for that. It's gonna be really fun, I think, to see this game when it comes out, see how it looks and runs on the RE engine, because apparently this is a heavily customized version of it, which tells me they're probably not gonna go backwards and grab like Resident Evil 2 or anything like that. I think it's mostly just them going forwards now, which, who knows, maybe if they think that a game will run well enough on the Switch and it's running on RE engine, they'll make sure it's also customized enough to run on the Switch. This is just the first time we've seen it. Also, the 3DS has finally been officially discontinued. This probably shouldn't surprise anyone, but we have a statement from Nintendo themselves. It says, "We can confirm that the manufacturing of the Nintendo 3DS family of systems has ended. Nintendo and third-party games for the Nintendo 3DS family of systems will continue to be available in Nintendo eShop, on Nintendo.com, and at retail. We currently have no plans to end any existing online services for the Nintendo 3DS family of systems. Online play in Nintendo eShop will continue to be available, and it will be possible to access and re-download all previously purchased content in the foreseeable future." Is anyone really surprised to hear this? I figure not. I mean, you remember when the 3DS games used to show up in the Nintendo Directs and then they would only show one and then they just stopped showing them completely? Yeah, it was being phased out. We even had Walmart run that big sale alongside of Nintendo for like $100 2DS XL, and it seemed pretty obvious that they were just getting rid of extra stock that was left over in warehouses or anything Nintendo had left over. So it almost got to 10 years. It'd get 9.5 years because it came out early 2011. It was off by this much, but it was impressive to see the 3DS kind of claw its way back after a rough launch. Remember, they had to slash the price, they had to do the Nintendo Ambassador program for people who were early adopters, and they had to go as far as to apologize outright to investors for the whole situation that was going on with the Wii U and the 3DS. It was a crazy time with Nintendo then, but seemed to rebound pretty well. The library is great, tons of software. It's still worth picking one up now and going back and checking out a lot of the games. Oh, and do you remember the Marvel's Avengers game that came out pretty recently, right? We've talked about it on the podcast a few times. Ended up being this live service Destiny-like game, right? Well, it turns out it needed a couple of bug fixes. And by a couple, I mean like over 1,000. They actually bragged about it. It seemed it was very odd. If you look at the list, it's insane. And a lot of the headlines that are being run now, for example, like this one that says, "Massive Marvel's Avengers update patches literally 1,000 issues, crashes, graphical bugs, progression blockers, a ton of stuff." This is update 1.3.0, and the list is insane. I mean, it's like 8 pages. It just keeps going. There's so much stuff that I guess needed to be fixed here. That's not normal, right? Like to have that many. I really do wonder if this game was originally going to be like almost like a single player co-op style game, right? And then halfway through, they decided they needed to have live services implemented so that the money made sense to use the IPs for like Marvel and all this. That's all I could figure, because this this is like most of the game being fixed here. It's wild stuff. And guys, with some of the quick news out of the way, let's get into the bigger stuff. We're gonna start right away with the PlayStation 5 pre-order situation. Look, it wasn't a great week last week for PR for Sony. For sales and excitement and interest, it was great, right? Like, people were talking about the PlayStation 5 all over the place. Pre-orders were selling out, which means that people were mad at Sony, but then still giving them money for the console and all of this. It was crazy stuff last week. But one thing was clear, Sony didn't really hold up their end of the bargain when it came to pre-orders and make sure we knew when they were gonna go up, because if you remember, we had people from their marketing team show up and talk to even Jeff Keighley during the Summer's Games Fest, talking about how they wouldn't just press a button and spring pre-orders on us. They would let us know, don't bother going to the retail store ahead of time. Apparently we should have done that, because people who did got a pre-order for the PS5. At least they have them in hand now. We'll see how that works out when systems actually ship to stores. Make sure everyone has enough, because there's word that Amazon is working to maybe cancel some or let people know they might not have enough then. But Sony has decided to make a statement around the situation, saying, let's be honest, PlayStation 5 pre-orders could have been a lot smoother. We truly apologize for that. Over the next few days, we will release more PS5 consoles for pre-order. Retailers will share more details, and more PS5s will be available through the end of the year. So the word right now is, one, they probably will have pre-orders ready to go, at least some open back up, the day that the Xbox Series X and S will go on pre-order, which should be tomorrow, so keep an eye out for that. You'll probably have pre-orders all over the place for both systems there. The other thing is, according to Jim Ryan at Sony, they're going to work to have more PlayStation 5s available than PlayStation 4s when that launched, which they managed to move over 1 million units in the first 24 to 48 hours, which is pretty good. If they can have more PS5s ready to go for the holidays specifically, I think scalpers who are left kind of holding on to a PlayStation 5 now will end up just having to move it for a regular price, and it would just been a massive waste of time. So don't go on eBay and buy them now. It does sound like Sony has plans to, I don't want to say flood the market, but certainly put a lot more systems out there. But there was one other thing that I noticed online, and a lot of people were bringing this up. The digital PlayStation 5 system was harder to find than just the regular PlayStation 5 system. This was odd, because I thought Sony might work to put more and more of those out there, since it's more appealing at a lower cost and it locks people in to their digital storefront. But check this out. Ars Technica did a survey of different GameStops, for example, and they found that it was a fairly large split towards the regular PlayStation 5, even going as far as an 87-13 split. And then on top of that, Best Buy Canada, according to Ars Technica, their website, showed 19,000 standard edition and 3,000 digital edition pre-orders that was available on Wednesday, which is, again, surprising, unless Sony really is taking that large of a loss on that digital edition. That's the only thing I can think of. Otherwise, you figure they'd want to stock the place like crazy with those, because they make more money in the long run. Maybe they're thinking about doing that after the first year or so and really pushing that digital edition as costs continue to come down throughout the life of the system itself. But good news here from Sony. One, they of course apologize, but the big thing that we all want is, when are more PS5 pre-orders going to go up, and can you control that launch with retailers just becoming sporadic as soon as the green light goes, right? As soon as that pops up, they just go and they launch PlayStation 5 pre-orders. So it's tough, especially with bots now running around with scalpers grabbing RTX 3080s and PS5s. It's tough right now just to get a pre-order on anything, it seems. Next up, let's talk about the Nintendo Switch and emulators, specifically one that Nintendo is currently using to do the Mario 3D All-Stars collection, of course, and that being Mario Sunshine. Yes, that's right. We are talking about that GameCube emulator that seemingly was created or implemented by Nintendo Europe. So let's check this out here. You can see Oatmeal Dome, who has done a lot of data mining, provided some great information over on Twitter, saying, interestingly, Nintendo's GameCube or Wii emulator appears to implement more GameCube and Wii GPU features than they need. For example, Bounding Box, mainly used by Paper Mario games, Z-Freeze used in Mario Strikers, EA Sports games, more. And they say that they're not saying that these games are coming, they're just giving examples, of course. To go on, they say, it seems likely that Nerd implemented a generic GameCube and Wii emulator that can run any game, and then made specific builds that target Galaxy and Sunshine. And they say perhaps a sign of more to come. It isn't guaranteed. We'll just have to see. I certainly hope, at least. The other interesting part is, in Mario Sunshine, there is a glitch where there are little squares that show kind of the paths of different blocks in certain areas. And that also is a glitch that is currently running in the Mario Sunshine and the Mario 3D All-Stars collection. So even Nintendo seems to have some issues with emulation of these games. But would Nintendo create an emulator that can run Wii and GameCube games, by the way, going forward? That's something to keep in mind. Would they create that thinking that they could be using it going forward? I think yes, I do. And I mean, if rather than have to port the entire thing over, if you have an emulator that can do a good chunk of the work and then you have to just kind of shape the game around it, because it does seem that they did some work in Sunshine, button prompts, different things in the game that show you how you're supposed to use FLUDD or anything. We'll have different buttons and we'll even Joy-Con controllers and stuff in there, right? So they do some work outside of just moving it over and just saying, okay, emulator, do your thing, right? There's still stuff they have to make work. And having this moved over, running on ARM, which, I mean, going forward, if they're going to keep with this hybrid concept, well, I'll figure they will, this could be an emulator that they've created now, but can last them into the future for a while. And it also opens up the library of GameCube and Wii. And I mean, think about that, especially going into next year. Think about what next year is, okay? It's the 35th anniversary for Zelda. I wonder what GameCube game or Wii game they could put into a collection there. Could this emulator pop back up in a Zelda 35th anniversary collection where maybe they throw Twilight Princess in there? Maybe they throw Wind Waker in there? Maybe they go back and get some of the older Zelda games. Maybe they do like Ocarina of Time just to throw it in there, and then they do maybe Majora's Mask, and they move up Wind Waker and Twilight Princess. There's a lot of things they could do. Maybe they use part of this emulator, kind of like what they did with Galaxy, and they work to rebuild or recreate or kind of remake Skyward Sword. There's a lot of things here. I don't know if they'd go that far for Skyward Sword, but to create another collection around this emulator, I mean, it makes a lot of sense. It's there, it's been created, and it seems like it would be compatible with a lot of those games. So something to keep in mind going forward here. If we get that collection and they data mine it and they find that that emulator is still there, Nintendo has built something, I think, for the future going forward for their hybrid device. Also, if you want more information around this from someone who knows exactly what they're talking about when it comes to programming, emulation, all this, check out Modern Vintage Gamer, because he did do a pretty cool breakdown of the overall setup here with the Mario 3D All-Stars collection and that GameCube Wii emulator. Next up, let's talk about the Sony Xperia Play. Now, if you don't know what this was back in 2011. Sony released a phone that was kind of like a PSP. It was this handheld device that was going to merge cell phones and their portable market. It kind of mashed it all into one. It was a weird looking phone, but the idea and kind of what they had planned was interesting. They were even going to try to bring like PSP style games to this device, and it would have like its own section on the Play Store. And apparently internally they tested like God of War, for example. Like, that's crazy. Little Big Planet. So some bigger games that would come over and you'd play on this phone. Unfortunately, it didn't seem to work out for them, and they kind of moved on from it. And then of course went to the Vita, and after that, well, that was kind of it for handhelds with Sony. But it seems that they may have been working on a sequel to this Sony Xperia Play. The next one appears to have been this. This is a Sony Xperia Play 2 that was spotted online. Now, this appears to have been spotted on like an online marketplace in China that was selling it, and it seems to just call it, I guess, just a PSP Xperia Play 2. And everyone's trying to figure out more information about this. It seems that maybe it got out from the factory, maybe they're recycling it, maybe they're doing field destroy on it because it's so old. But if this is correct and this is real, does that mean that Sony was really going to do I guess a Sony Xperia Play 2 kind of alongside of that Vita? Maybe they had plans to do like Vita games on it and continue to work towards that mobile market. It's a really cool thing to think about, and there could be more information coming out about this later on. I don't know if someone bought this or what happened with it, but I'm going to keep an eye out for this one, because if someone managed to get a hold of it, it could be a very interesting piece for, I guess, the direction that Sony went in, which wasn't this, and I guess they just stuck with the Vita, and eventually just no more handhelds. And in our last bit of news, let's talk about an update for Doom Eternal on the Nintendo Switch, because I see you guys asking a lot, what's going on with Doom Eternal? This is a great question. I ask it all the time myself. Well, we have a bit of an update here, and it could be good news, maybe even falling in line with my prediction the other day for when this could be coming out. This was at PAX Online, and we can see this quote here from Marty Stratton. He says, I wish I could give you specifics. I read all the comments, and when we say anything about Doom Eternal, there's always the one out of every 5 comments is, yeah, how about you tell us about the Switch? I know people are anxious. We're trying to make it the best version of the game it possibly can be, so we've been working with Panic Button. They are also, like everybody in work from home, it's taken a little bit longer to get there, but we want it to be everything it possibly can be. It's very close, and we're trying to be very uncompromising with what it needs to be because there's a high demand for it. We will be talking about it again in the not too distant future. It is close, but I can't say exactly how close. So here's what I think is going to happen. I've heard some other people talk about this too. There'll probably be a partner showcase next month, like mid next month. I'm gonna say sometime in October, and they'll either launch it like right around Halloween or like the first week of November, somewhere in there. I think it's going to be one of those kind of announcements and then releases. I mean, the game's already been out for a while now on other platforms. My one question is, will they do anything, throw something in there to kind of make it up to Switch owners who had to wait this long? Because originally, it was going to show up when the other versions of the game showed up, and it just didn't. And look, there's issues, obviously, work from home situation, Panic Button going back and forth with Bethesda and id and all this, and I'm sure it's all over the place behind the scenes trying to get this on the Switch running as best as it can. But there's always a possibility that maybe they do add something in, whether it's an exclusive skin for your character, or maybe they even just drop the DLC in there and they call it the Doom Eternal Complete Edition. We'll see what they decide to do here, but I would keep my eyes out for this one because I do think it's going to be announced relatively soon. And we'll finish up with the comment of the day, as you're seeing here. This is from Sharito saying, Nintendo, so how many Monster Hunter games are you giving us? Capcom, none. 65 million Switch units later, Nintendo, come again. Capcom, okay, here's 2 Monster Hunter games. So I will give Capcom credit on this one. They started development on Monster Hunter Rise a while ago, certainly before the Switch had Animal Crossing come out and the thing exploded in sales. Even before that, it was selling well, but like Capcom's been working on this thing for a bit now, like a good portion of the Switch's life already. So they were the ones that asked for the extra gigabyte, and it seems that it was because they wanted to move the RE engine over. You probably could make a case for Monster Hunter Stories 2, like, oh, Capcom was going to do just this one Monster Hunter game, then they saw the Switch really accelerating in sales, and they started development on Stories 2. Sure, I could see that, but Capcom was actually on board with the Switch earlier than a lot of people thought. And ladies and gentlemen, that's going to do it here for Newswave. Enjoyed this video, guys? Hit the like button, really helps out. If not, hit the dislike. Leave comments down below about everything we talked about today, whether it's the PlayStation 5 pre-order situation. Were you able to get one? Are you kind of banking on Sony putting pre-orders back up in a more controlled fashion so you can get one? Or are you gonna really risk it and wait till release day, see if you can get a walk-in somewhere? Let me know about that down below. And then what about Nintendo's emulator that they're using right now in the Mario 3D All-Stars collection with GameCube and Wii and all of this? Do you think they have plans for the future, specifically next year for that Zelda 35th anniversary? Thanks guys for watching, and I'll see you next time.